This is live special coverage from NPR News. I'm Ari Shapiro. President Trump promised that his first address to Congress in his second term would be about accomplishments and his plans for the future. In remarks that stretched over 90 minutes, he claimed victories like cracking down on immigration at the southern border and major cuts to the federal government. He also promised economic gains as a result of the controversial tariffs that he's levied against Canada and Mexico. It's all part of his vision for the future of America.
6 weeks ago, I stood beneath the dome of this Capitol and proclaimed the dawn of the golden age of America. From that moment on, it has been nothing but swift and unrelenting action to usher in the greatest and most successful era in the history of our country. We have accomplished more in 43 days than most administrations accomplished in 4 years or 8 years, and we are just getting started.
In the Democratic response, Michigan Senator Alyssa Slotkin said there's a responsible way to make change and a reckless way.
Because whether you're from Wyandotte or Wichita, most Americans share 3 core beliefs: that the middle class is the engine of our country, that strong national security protects us from harm, and that our democracy, no matter how messy, is unparalleled and worth fighting for.
Well, joining me here in the studio is NPR White House correspondent Asma Khalid and senior political editor and correspondent Domenico Montanaro. Good to have you both here.
Thank you.
And joining us from Capitol Hill is Deirdre Walsh, NPR congressional correspondent. Thank you for being with us, Deirdre.
Hey, Ari.
I want to begin with a standout moment for each of you. Asma, will you give us one that stuck out in your mind?
A standout moment. Gosh, I mean, I think the standout moment for me was very early on, actually, where we saw Congressman Al Green interrupt repeatedly the President of the United States, saying that there was no mandate. My understanding from the pool reporting is that he was referring to there being the fact that the president doesn't have a mandate to cut Medicaid in particular. Eventually, he was ushered out, escorted out of the room, and I've never seen someone actually ushered out of the chamber, right? Mm-hmm. For several years, going back to President Obama's State of the Union, we've sort of grown accustomed to some interruptions from folks on the other side of the aisle, some partisan interruptions. I've never seen a moment like that.
Domenico, what stood out to you tonight?
I was struck really right off the top with Trump saying America is back. It just seemed to harken back to Joe Biden also saying America is back, literally the exact same words when he first came into office. And it really struck me, it was something that we've been thinking about and talking about leading up to the 2024 presidential election, about how that election has been so much about what it means to be American. Mm-hmm. And clearly we have strong divides and deeply held feelings in this country about what those strong values are and should be and what the country should become. And I think that a lot of what we're doing in watching what some of the right and left are arguing over in the country is really what America's going to be going forward post, this World War II American leadership in the world up until, I would say, 2016, 2017, when Trump came into office, where we've had this real big shift. I also thought him saying Trump Biden as many times as he did was also kind of interesting because, at a certain point, right, you can't continue to blame the past administration. Barack Obama did that quite a bit when he first came into office and was handed certainly an economy that was in free fall and a war in the Middle East that was, a disaster by all accounts.
But at some point you have to take
At some point,
yeah.
You get judged for what your record will be. And I wonder when that's going to be for Trump.
Deirdre, what stood out to you?
I just think the stark difference in vibe just from one side of the room to the other was just really stunning. It usually is inside the House chamber, depending on who's giving the speech. Lawmakers of the president's party usually stand up and applaud. But tonight was just even more so. I mean, just throughout the really extensive speech, Republicans were, cheering and standing. Democrats, we obviously starting with Texas Democratic Congressman Al Green, confronting the president, pointing his cane at him, screaming at him, "You don't have a mandate," and being shouted down, sort of followed by other Democrats just walking out in sort of groups, was just not something I've seen before.
This was a speech full of big claims, and our correspondents are fact-checking and adding analysis online at npr.org. But I want to tick through some of those big claims right now. Asma, President Trump promised new jobs and trillions of dollars in new revenue thanks to tariffs on goods from countries like Canada and Mexico, China. Are those claims grounded in fact?
Well, if we can look to recent history, which is when Donald Trump was last in office, he put in place massive tariffs on China during that time period. If you go back to 2018, 2019, approximately $380 billion worth of goods faced tariffs. That did not lead to an increase in revenue. It did not help solve any sort of intransigent problems with the national debt. And the overall consensus from researchers and from economists is that these tariffs were not a net positive. They were not a net gain. So if they are being sought as some sort of possible source of revenue, I would say we look to the first Trump term. It didn't happen.
Deirdre, how popular are those tariffs among members of the president's own party?
I mean, there's definitely a split, but on this issue, there are more Republicans willing to break with the president than I've seen on any issue since he's, taken the oath in January. I mean, Republicans, even before they went into effect, were publicly worrying about the impact on prices in their home states, on the potential impact on inflation, and saying that they, don't agree with the president's move to use tariffs. I think some of them think that they are sort of a political tool that might be short term. But and are okay with it, and sort of willing to give the president a little bit of time. But I mean, I think as we've seen the markets react in the last couple of days, and retailers react, this could be something that more Republicans may be willing to speak out about.
Domenico, another area where the president broke with traditional Republican orthodoxy is Russia and Ukraine. And he spent a surprisingly short amount of time talking about the war in Ukraine, given all of the drama of the last week. Did you get a clear sense from tonight's speech of his foreign policy vision and where relationships with U.S. allies are headed?
Well, frankly, I don't think he has a foreign policy vision. I think that this is somebody who believes in American power and might and what's in it for the United States. This isn't somebody who's going to be ideological about standing up for countries that need to fight against the bigger guy like Russia. That's not really what Donald Trump is about. I thought it was notable that he didn't speak that much about it tonight because I think what he wanted was to go into tonight with a deal. He wanted Friday to not have happened. The way that meeting in the Oval Office went with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky not only blew up potential Ukrainian chances of having aid to help them fend off Russia who attacked them, but it also hurt Trump politically because he wanted to be able to have that minerals deal to wave in the air and say, look, I'm here making way to peace, and look at what I've been able to do that Biden couldn't do, bring Russia and Ukraine to the table, and we're on the verge of peace.
He
didn't
did
get
talk
that
about
tonight.
the letter he got from Zelensky.
Right. But he did not get what he wanted tonight, which was to boast of being the great peacemaker.
And so how dramatic a break is what we are seeing from Trump from the policies that both parties pursued in the past?
It's a complete 180 about face. I mean, this is not how the United States has ever operated in the past and taking the side of dictators or parroting the kinds of talking points that someone says. Now, Trump will say, look, I haven't taken a side. I'm trying to get both people to the table. But Ukraine and American allies in NATO would say, this is somebody who came into their house, right? Get out of my house. This isn't the way to do this is not to say take a wing.
Just briefly, Asma, what are you looking for from the White House in the coming days following this speech?
What I'm looking for is a sense of when they begin to pivot a little bit more to the economic message. Donald Trump said he won this election for two main issues, the border and grocery prices. We heard a lot about the border tonight. We frankly didn't hear as much as I was expecting about inflation. And when he did bring up inflation, egg prices, he blamed that on the previous administration.
Asma, Domenico, Deirdre, good to have all three of you with us tonight.
It's great to be with you.
I'm Ari Shapiro, and this has been live special coverage from NPR News. If you want to see an annotated version of President Trump's address with fact-checking and analysis from NPR correspondents, head on over to npr.org. We'll have more on Morning Edition tomorrow, so be sure to tune in, and thanks for joining us. This is NPR News.